Good morning and welcome to Salam Media. This is another edition of News and Views, the Wednesday edition of News and Views with me, Salaila Makwidira. And our first guest is Genevieve Quintal. She's from Amnesty International. She's the Media and Communications Officer. And we're going to be speaking about something that I feel like is very, very, very close to everyone's heart, what is currently happening. Good morning, Genevieve. We'll be chatting a bit about what's currently happening in Gaza and how Israeli forces, they are, as you put it so eloquently, manufacturing a humanitarian disaster. If we can just touch a bit on that, why did you call it that? Why are you saying a humanitarian disaster is being manufactured by Israeli forces?
Good morning, and thanks for having me, and morning to all your listeners and viewers. We've looked at what's happening, and we're saying that not only is Israel creating one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, but it's also displaying a callous indifference to the fate of Gaza's population by creating conditions which the IEC has said place them at imminent risk of a genocide. And that's by blocking humanitarian aid that's coming into the Gaza Strip. We've seen that since the beginning of the October 7 attacks, we've seen aid going into Gaza decreasing. But after the ICJ hearing, the aid going into Gaza decreased even more. And this defies the ICJ ruling. And the scale and gravity of the humanitarian catastrophe that's being caused by Israel is based on their relentless bombardment, destruction. It's a suffocating siege on more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And it risks irreparable harm. We're already there. As I said, I just wanted to get the figures for you, that in the 3 weeks following the ICJ order, the number of trucks entering Gaza decreased by a third, from an average of 146 a day in the 3 weeks prior to the ICJ ruling to an average of 105 a day 3 weeks after the ruling. And that goes against the ICJ's ruling that they had to avoid a humanitarian crisis and avoid a possible genocide on the Palestinian people.
A very grim picture that you're painting there. I'm pretty sure Amnesty International, has its ear on the ground. You probably have, communication with some, humanitarian aid workers that are in Palestine and in Gaza at the current moment. What kind of picture are they drawing for you guys? Because I'm pretty sure when you're so far away in South Africa, it's difficult to imagine and, put it to, physical, imagination of what the situation is like there. What are they saying to you? What kind of a picture are they drawing about how just difficult the situation is in that part of the world?
It's extremely difficult. Our researchers on the ground have spoken to 10 workers from 5 different humanitarian agencies and organizations. This was in late Feb, so recently, who described the horrifying conditions in Gaza and the conditions that are affecting them and their families. These are Gazans who actually live in the Gaza Strip. We know it's very difficult for people to get in and out of Gaza. So they themselves are subject to what's happening there. And they all said that their ability to get aid into and around Gaza had either remained the same or gotten worse since the ICJ ruling. They also highlighted Israel's failure to take obvious steps, such as opening all the available access points, which they were supposed to do, and crossings to enable them to transfer aid more rapidly and on a larger scale to areas, especially I think it's the north that is like almost inaccessible. And this hasn't happened because, again, those humanitarian operations come under military attack. We've also had Israeli protesters demanding the government stop allowing aid into Gaza, which has been blockading one of the entrances. And this has also stopped a bit of aid getting through. But as we've said, this doesn't relieve Israel, the Israeli authorities, of their obligation to take the necessary steps to maintain the unhindered flow of aid. And that's not happening. So we're actually hearing from people on the ground, like I said, people who are trying to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza because they work for these organizations, but they themselves are facing the same problems because they live in the areas. The one story of like families having to use animal fodder to make bread, and that animal fodder, fuel, food, all those things on shortage that even now they can't do that. A mother who gave birth early in Feb, who firstly does not have breast milk. And I think if you know as a woman, if you're stressed, you don't have breast milk. She can't find any milk to feed her child. And these are the everyday realities of Gazans living in the Gaza Strip. And very little is being done to ensure that humanitarian aid gets to them. And that's
Mm,
why we say this is like the biggest manufactured humanitarian crisis.
Before I let you go, in a situation like this, you always imagine that there's a recourse, some sort of, reprieve, relief, something that we can do. But with this one, it just looks, bleak because this is a court order that was, a judgment that was released by the ICJ, and it has, Israel is not, adhering to it. Uh, I'm trying so hard to imagine if there's any kind of recourse. Is there any kind of, way out of this to make sure that humanitarian aid does come into Gaza, and that, we avoid what, seemingly seems to be a bleak situation, and thousands and thousands of more of lives are going to die, not just by, the constant bombardment and the bombing and the, shooting that's happening, but also from starvation and, just lacking basic necessities. So, is there recourse? Is there something that can be done?
So look, at this stage, what we say, what's the best solution? Only an immediate and sustained ceasefire can save lives and ensure that the ICJ's provisional measures, that includes the delivery of life-saving aid, can be implemented. But then again, like we said, the US has for a third time vetoed a UN Security Council resolution demanding the immediate ceasefire. And in this case, we're saying countries with influence over Israel, over the Israeli government, such as the USA, the UK, Germany, and other allies, are just standing by and watching Palestinians die. We need them to put pressure on the Israeli government. I know it seems that we need international justice needs to take its course. Now look, the ICJ is still having hearings. We know that the ICC is investigating what's happened pre-October 7th. Obviously, there's been Gaza's the biggest open air prison. It's been like that for 16 years. But yeah, we need international justice to step up now. We need international justice to play its parts. And unfortunately, there needs to be consequences for Israel, not for defying the ICJ ruling. What those are, that's up to the international justice systems, unfortunately. But also, we need to carry on calling and pushing for a ceasefire. And like I said, those countries that have influence over the Israeli state need to join into those calls.
And also, I'm pretty sure as Amnesty International, all around the world where there's, where there's conflict or, any kind of crisis, you have seen, probably a lot of situations similar to what's happening in Gaza. But, in comparison, to, other, crisis that you might have witnessed, all across the world, where does the current crisis in Gaza fare? Is it the worst you've ever seen, or is it right there, with some of the worst that you've ever seen, around the world?
It's difficult for me to answer that. I'd have to go back and see. I mean, when was the last time we spoke about a possible genocide? We had Myanmar that had big issues. We have Tigray in Ethiopia that's also, having huge issues. The Sudan, I would hate to say that one is worse than the other, because any loss of human life and violation of human rights is an absolute no, and we wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I think this is maybe one of the worst. It's difficult for me to say. I don't want to say outright that it is, but I definitely, if we're calling it a possible manufactured humanitarian, not a possible, a manufactured humanitarian crisis and a possible genocide, it's definitely up there with one of the worst.
I think we're going to leave it there. Genevieve, thank you so much for giving us your time and painting a really catastrophic picture there. But thank you to people like you, for keeping your ears and eyes on the ground and trying to remedy the situation in Gaza as it happens. Thank you so much, and I hope to chat to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Well, there you have it there. Amnesty International South Africa Media and Communications Officer, Genevieve Quintal. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking the Bella Bill and how it's going to be affecting you right here on Salam Media.